Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
My name is Micah Grant. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, South Central. Spent some time down there, obviously. Went to college at UC Davis, ran track, earned a track scholarship. Then I spent some time in the governor's newsroom, interning there. That's when I really started to get into politics. I think it's interesting, and I feel like if you want to affect legislation, you have to actually be a part of it and be in tune with it. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to be here as well, and I really appreciate your when I came here and asked for getting press registration, and you immediately kind of signed me up and took me around and
no problem.
Introduced me to people,
right.
And really appreciate that. And when I told my friends I was coming to the Republican convention, they said, "Oh, you got to be crazy."
No, you don't. You don't have to be crazy.
So you were very gracious, and I really appreciate that.
That's no problem.
Very empathetic, I would actually say.
Empathetic.
Kind of putting yourself in my shoes. And,
no, it's understandable. I try to help everyone.
Yeah, I saw that. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
So what I've been asking people about is what their most important values are. And for you, what would you say is the most important value in your life?
I would have to say my religion, and then my family. And by family, if you're willing to understand my point of view, you're welcome to my family. I don't think that's something that's exclusive. I'm not going to try to force my personal beliefs on anyone. Rather, I would like to share it with you, and if you can understand what I'm talking about, then we can set up a healthy discourse. But religion is definitely one of the driving factors in my life. My father's a pastor, and my mother was saved under his ministry. So just religion and the Bible has really instilled upon me a self of individual responsibility and a kind of a penchant to help others any way I can. To whom much is given, much is required. And so I just try to live by the rules of the Bible and try to also put myself in people's shoes so I can understand them. And from a religious perspective, if you can understand a person, it's easier to try to direct them to a certain scripture, a certain passage. So that's just where my empathetic values come from.
In your life, can you talk about how you developed those values? What actually happened? Is there like a story of how religion became important to you?
Well, I'd like to say because my dad is a pastor, I never had the opportunity to not be religious. My dad would always give me the word, always give me the scriptures. So it's been to me since I was younger, but I guess my own personal story when religion actually became active and not passive. My father was, is a cancer survivor. He had prostate cancer, and I can remember praying from since I was, 4 years old, asking God, can you spare my father's life? My dad is an older gentleman. He's 70. I'm only 23, and so him being a survivor of that is it's a miracle. It's a blessing. But I never thought he would live to see my high school graduation because of how sick he always was. And I remember graduating. Well, prior to that, I would always pray, God, if my dad can just see my high school graduation and let him know that I'm on to greater things, that would really just, I'd be appreciative for that. And it didn't hit me until I saw my dad graduating. Until it didn't hit me until I was graduating, and I saw my dad walking slowly through the gates, as sick as he is, and I just broke down and cried because I remembered my prayers from when I was 4 years old, and that was just really let me know that God was real in my life, and He would always be in my life as long as I continue to serve Him and reach out and find others. Yeah.
And in terms of empathy, it sounded like empathy was an important part of your life.
Right.
How did you learn about that?
Well, the Bible's pretty clear about, understanding different viewpoints. And, like I said, too much is given, much is required. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should forget individual responsibility and self-worth and self-efficacy. But I don't think there's anyone that can say that someone didn't help them along the way. To ignore that, I think, would be outrageous, to say the least. And, that's just to, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Those are some golden rules that, even though they sound redundant and rudimentary, we tend to forget. And I don't forget them because they're actually really good guidelines on how to live your life.
Empathy is often described as a metaphor of seeing through someone else's eyes and looking through someone else's, and walking in someone else's shoes.
Right.
If you create a metaphor for empathy that is your own metaphor, what would empathy be like?
Empathy would be like a dove, actually. You know, my dad actually used to raise doves. He's Jamaican, and the Jamaicans have a lot of hobbies. You know, I've watched doves interact. You know, they truly are harmless, but at the same time, they know how to, defend themselves in a meaningful way, not in a way that's going to be so obstructionist, if you will, that they can't interact later. You know, and I guess we're all like that to a degree, but I just think that empathy would probably be a dove, because they actually, they look out for each other. So I mean, that's even growing up in inner city, you have to look out for each other. So yeah, I would say that empathy would be like a dove. I mean, from an interpersonal level, I think it is important before you take action, or just to understand someone, because sympathy is different from empathy, and the fact that sympathy, you can be remorseful for what happened, but processing the own emotion for yourself, that's empathy, understanding what happened because you have similar experiences. And so a lot of people forget their similar experiences and don't bring it back to relate to other people, and so I think empathy is a really strong word. I think it's even stronger emotion that we should be mindful of.
So you think it's important and should be mindful of it?
Absolutely. It's completely essential. You should be empathetic. But empathy, being empathetic doesn't, like I said, doesn't necessarily mean you should sacrifice your beliefs. But I think it makes you a better leader. I think it helps you make better decisions. In terms of, any issue, political, fiscal, social. And being empathetic is definitely the way to go.
Well, I know we're here at the Republican convention, and I've gone through, for example, Barack Obama's speeches, and he's mentioned empathy maybe 50, 60 times in his speeches. How does that, what kind of comes to your mind when you hear that?
I think he's an excellent speaker. I think, from any standpoint, using the word empathy, I think it's going to help you connect with your audience. And so making that connection is essential at any level.